When greed is enthroned, be it in a community or nation, ungodliness is celebrated at the altar of human pleasure. Sunday at Elijah, the mountain of ignorance. For decades, the prosperity preaching movement has eroded trust in the church. They have shamelessly and publicly made it about themselves. Their opulent and obscenely wasteful lifestyles cloaked by the invoking of the name of God. They have endorsed presidents in contentious elections, funded hate and many other things that do not honor the name of God, all the while using the same name they carelessly dishonor to manipulate congregants to keep financing their misguided opulence and greed. They have corrupted temples and turned them into marketplaces. No wonder Christ whipped them then, and Christ is whipping them now. At the core of Christianity is a heart for people and community. So if you were to look at it from the perspective of tithes, then the second, third, and sixth tithes come into practical play here to serve the community, to give to the community, to feed the community. The church's activities must be geared towards missions, the outside world, including discipleship, training more people to have this charitable heart and live as Christ lived, a life of truth. This reminds me of a story I would love to share with you. Ever heard the term snake oil salesman? Well, there is a long and interesting story about these charlatans. I will share just one of the many versions that gained traction. People looking to make a quick buck got the idea from Chinese laborers working on the first transcontinental railroad. The Chinese laborers used the oils produced by the Chinese water snake, rich in omega-3 fatty acids, to soothe sore muscles and treat arthritis. However, the conmen could not access the same snake, but wanted access to money. So they came up with a concoction that they would later on sell off as medication to cure any ailment. There was no curative agent in any of the concoctions that they sold to unsuspecting buyers. The craziest version of this story goes that during the Black Gold Rush, the oil rush in the Wild West, they would go to unsuspecting ranch owners who had hoped they would be able to break the glass ceiling and become wealthy when oil was found on their parcels of land. To make this happen, these charlatans would go around neatly dressed in suits and claim that once they poured snake oil into the family well, the water table would turn into crude oil and they would suddenly be millionaires. In this period, putting together $1,000 was mind-blowing. Imagine telling a rancher who had never seen more than $200 held together that they would be a millionaire. Naturally, they all immediately signed up, and snake oil was rapidly poured down their water wells, and they were then instructed to wait for a few days, after which they would see black gold. Of course, by then the salesmen had already skipped town. When the ranchers drew water from the well, a layer of oil was present on the water, but it was not because the water tables had turned to oil, but rather the so-called snake oil, a mix of substances, included a touch of petroleum oil. That is how a large chunk of the Wild West was swindled. The hope of wealth. So coming back to the scourge of prosperity preachers, one of these preachers came out and told all his followers to disregard the past 20 years or so of his teachings on tithing. His teachings, his books, merchandise, and prayer items were all for sale. He said his teachings were incorrect and not in line with the era of grace. He then proceeded to advise his followers to throw away everything they had bought from him on the subject and listen to him for the true teaching. What an embarrassment. Imagine what that turnaround did to a man or a woman who faithfully followed these false principles for decades, expecting their lives to turn around, only to find that their hope was all on a lie. Do you honestly think that these people would readily submit themselves to another spiritual authority and risk being misled again? This is the kind of deception that ails the church. What the Bible calls every wind of teaching, and in another instance, strange fire or evil worship. Unfortunately, we are seeing more personal businesses coming up and calling themselves churches, while in essence, they are not. The church, the organization, has bills and wages that need to be paid, but the church must operate only within its means. This is where desperate people keep hammering their congregants with Malachi 3:10 to pay their tithes and not rob God. This is manipulation, not in the spirit and letter of the law. If they lived within their means, they would not need to extort money from their congregants or pray for breakthrough all year round. They lack the proper context of the word, which is never meant to guilt trip or twist anyone into paying 10% of their income into this business. Congregants can see the opulence and waste that their leaders indulge in, and they have stories of exploitation and gross misconduct within the walls of these buildings. Join me next week for part 4 of Tithe or No Tithe. This is Tony, and this is 5 Minute Bytes.